Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. A little while back, we went through all of the rear grips here in Warzone because one, we got a lot of options. Two, they're not all exactly what they seem. So we went through and broke down the detailed stats of all of them, the little hidden bonuses and cons that you might not know about every one of them. And by far, the most popular comments on that video were, Zach, can you do the same thing for the Underbarrels? So today, that's exactly what we're doing. We are breaking down all the true stats of every single Underbarrel in the game. There are some different options for the LMGs and the rifles as well. Pretty sure I got every single one of them. I triple checked. So we end up getting some very interesting information about a lot of these. So I have actually gone through and made a whole graph now of the various different Underbarrels that we have in the game between the main weapon classes. And I've gone through and looked at the stats between Sim, which is just straight data mine stats, and then also True Game Data, who goes in and manually tests everything because the man is just a beast like that. And I've sort of gathered all the intel from each of those sites and averaged it out where I need to, and double checked everything there. So keep in mind as we're going through all these, anything that has an asterisk here means that that value, the decrease or the increase to that stat, is weapon specific. So it might be different on the MP40 versus the Blixen versus the STG versus the Bren. It's different for every gun that it is used on, right? Anything that doesn't have an asterisk though is just general. It's the same across the board. So starting first with our Strife Angled Underbarrel here, this ends up giving us a 7% horizontal control increase across the board. So any weapon you use Strife Angled on, that's going to give you a 7% increase to horizontal control. The con here though is that it does give you worse sprint to fire. That's what that stands for. We're going to use that several times as an abbreviation throughout the video. So this is best for any weapon that has a significant amount of horizontal control, or recoil I should say. So for instance, the Type 100 bounces a lot left to right. This would be a great option to help counter some of that. The KGM40 moves up and to the right or up and to the left, one or the other. It's got a decent amount of horizontal movement. That would help out with that. Any gun that's going to move horizontally, that's the hardest recoil to control, whether you're on keyboard or controller, mouse I should say, or controller. So that's a huge benefit to have. Strife Angled is one of the more important Underbarrels that we have in the game. Moving on over to Carver here, it's basically the reverse. This one is 7% vertical control. So obviously it's gonna be best for any weapon that has a significant amount of vertical recoil. And to be honest, vertical recoil is the easiest in the game to actually counter. It's just pulling straight back. So this is not always the most necessary unless you just want to make sure that your weapon's going to be the easiest to use, right? So for instance, on the automaton, which has straight vertical recoil, you could use this and it'd make it even more minimal and easy to use, so you wouldn't have to work as hard to control that. This also gives you slightly better hip fire, but only in certain cases. It's meaningful. It's different for every gun. It does hurt your aim down sight speed though, and that varies depending on the weapon as well. It's a little bit worse on ARs versus SMGs, so on and so forth. But basically, Strife Angled for horizontal recoil, Carver for vertical. That's pretty much no knowledge at this point, but you do get exact percentages now with this. Then we have the compact Underbarrel, which ends up giving us a 10% increase across the board for ADS movement speed. So basically strafe speed when you are aiming down sights. There are no cons listed here according to Sim, which again is data mined directly from the game. So anything that would change with this attachment would be seen there. No cons are mentioned. So it's just straight up better ADS movement speed. And obviously this means it's best for any build you want to focus on strafe speed. So whether that be a SMG with strafe speed that you want to just go crazy with, you could build the Blixen out for that, you could build the Armaguerra out for that. It makes that really competitive there. And honestly, it's one of my favorite Underbarrels because strafe builds are a ton of fun and they throw players off a lot. Moving back over here, we've got our Handstop. This, of course, is another pretty basic one that a lot of players know about by now. This ends up giving you a 4% vertical and horizontal recoil increase, or control increase, I should say, across the board. So you're going to get a little bit of vertical and a little bit of horizontal here. Obviously, not as much as on the Strife Angled or on the Carver, but some of each. And it ends up actually hurting your hip fire accuracy and your hip fire spread. But obviously, that's not a huge deal for most cases because you're not hip firing a ton if you're using something for control. So kind of an obsolete con, if you will. And this is gonna be best for just general recoil. Certain weapons have a little bit of vertical and a little bit of horizontal movement. The STG, for instance, this could work really well there still if you just want a little bit of help. Personally, I always feel like negating as much horizontal as possible is the way to go, because then you can just focus on vertical control, which as mentioned is super easy, pulling straight back, to counter that. So Handstop is decent, but I feel like for truly attacking recoil for certain guns, it's not always the best option. Then we get this skeletal underbarrel. This is another fun one. This ends up giving you a faster aim down sight time or speed, so you're going to be aiming down sights quicker, but that varies depending on the gun. It can be faster on certain SMGs versus rifles and vice versa. It also gives you a universal 1% movement speed increase, just a general non-ADS movement speed. So that's not a huge difference in core movement. It is something slightly better, but not something you're always going to be able to notice in game. And this does give you a worse hipfire spread and worse hipfire accuracy as well. So in this case, skeletal will be the best for aggressive builds that already have low recoil, because of course you're not getting any recoil benefits here like you would with Carver, with Strife Angled, with Handstop, etc. For instance, I love using this on things like the Cooper. It's super easy to control, the PPSH as well, because you can make them more aggressive with the faster ADS and the slight increase to movement speed without really worrying about any major cons. Then we get the M1915 Steady, which is sort of an interesting one. This ends up giving you a 2% increase to vertical and horizontal control. So again, a little bit of both, just like over on the Handstop, but it's doing half of what the Handstop is. However, you get better hip fire with this, and this again varies depending on the gun. On SMGs, it's incredibly accurate. You still do get hip fire bonuses if you were to use this in general though, which is nice. It's just going to differ between weapons. No real cons here again too, so you can use this without any penalties. And while yes, you are getting some control aspects here with vertical and horizontal, truly I feel like this is a grip you'd be using if you want a hip fire build primarily. The PPSH hip fire build, for instance, insane with this on there. It's so accurate because of this underbarrel. So this is definitely one that's primarily meant for that. The control benefits are really just sort of like extra add-ons, if you will. Then we get to an interesting one, the flashlight. It's available on various guns. It does not have any pros. The pro listed in game is enemy nameplate range, not really relevant. So the cons here, it quite literally doesn't do anything, and it's best for wasting an attachment spot. There's no point. Don't run the flashlight. If you do, it's useless, completely obsolete. They should probably update that. Moving on, we got the pistol grip, something that actually does a lot. We go from an attachment that does nothing to this, which does a ton. So the pros on the pistol grip, this is a big one. It gives you a faster aim down sight speed, which is huge. It gives you a faster tack sprint to fire and normal sprint to fire. So in general, you're going to be able to fire a lot quicker after you're tack sprinting or regularly sprinting. It gives a universal 5% ADS move speed increase, and you also get better hip fire out of this as well. So the pistol grip is doing some insane benefits to aggressive builds here, right? The cons though, a little bit harsher. You're getting a minus 5% decrease for horizontal and vertical control. So you will notice more recoil if you're using the pistol grip, both horizontally and vertically, depending on any given gun's pattern. So in my opinion, this is best to use on weapons that have low recoil to begin with, and you want to make them very aggressive. This is one of the harsher cons that we have out of all the underbarrels, but with that many benefits, it's definitely a big trade-off there, and it's a well-balanced trade-off in my opinion. So, you know, for instance, MP40, pretty low recoil, you could probably run this. The Blixen, pretty low recoil, you could run this and it'd be mad aggressive. And then we get to the M3 Ready grip, which is available on rifles. Obviously certain grips are not available on certain guns. The M3 Ready grip is one of those that is exclusive to only certain options in the game. Like I said, rifles primarily, I believe. And the pros here, honestly pretty good. You get a universal plus 5% ADS move speed increase, so nice and fast for strafe builds. You also get a faster aim down sight time and faster tack sprint and regular sprint to fire. So this is going to be great, as mentioned here, for hybrid rifle builds. And what I mean by that is rifles that you want to be more meant for close range. This really is not a beneficial option for medium to long range builds because these benefits don't really matter as much in those gunfights. But close range, for instance, if you're going for a Volk SMG setup or an AS44 or an Akita SMG setup, this could be a really solid option. It does hurt your vertical control by 2%. It's not a huge decrease, but it is something you'll notice. However, if you're building a gun for close range, recoil is the, you know, not least important factor, but it's less of a big deal in close range fights because your targets are bigger, so recoil is not as much of an important thing in a gunfight. So this is honestly a really, really good grip. It's just meant for niche setups and niche conversions that basically force aggressive gameplay. Then we got another one that is, well, not the most ideal or practical. The Bayonet, which is available on a handful of options as well. The pros here, I listed intimidation because I think if you see someone running around with a bayonet in game, you're gonna look at them and say, I don't want to be near that person. They seem maybe a little bit crazy, and you know, you might not want to be up close and personal in their personal space bubble. You know, just use personal advice there. The cons, it has no real pros. I guess it's best for if you want to use a melee weapon that can stab but also shoot at the same time. Like obviously you're going to be able to melee a little bit more efficiently with a bayonet on there versus like the butt of your gun. So the stabby stab points there through the roof. The practical points though might dip into the negatives here. The bayonet's not really an option in any realistic way, unless of course you enjoy knifing and meleeing and whatnot. So would probably avoid that one. Moving on over to one that's a little bit more interesting than the bayonet, the bipod. This has been a pretty common topic recently because people have been talking about it. Personally, I think it's a bit overhyped because it doesn't really seem like it's that useful. The pros here are significant. You get a 16%, or at least from what I studied here, it kept coming out to the same numbers on all the guns I tested. You get a 16% increase to recoil across the board when you are crouched. And if you're proned, you end up getting a 24% increase to recoil. Now, those are big, big numbers. You look at the other options, it's 5%, 7%, 4%. 16 and 24 is a huge, huge jump. But the cons here are what, in my opinion, make it not really all that effective. You get a 12 millisecond increase to your sprint to fire time, so it's going to be slower and less aggressive, and it's completely useless if you're standing, if you're running, if you're jumping around. You have to be crouched or proned to end up using this to its full like benefits, right? So in my opinion, it's best for passive players, people who like to camp. Honestly, I feel like that's the most blunt way to put it. It's not something you would realistically use for a true meta setup because it relies on you having to crouch and it kills your movement there. You're obviously going to be able to get shot a lot easier when you're crouched and sort of turtling or proned and not being able to maneuver around, versus when you're b-hopping, slide canceling, running back and forth and tack sprinting. It's just not something that fits into natural gameplay as well as these other options. So while it does have insane benefits, they're super, super niche. Like I said, I don't think they're super practical. And then finally, we get to the one that confused me the most. The heavy foregrip, which to my knowledge is only available on light machine guns, and the pros on True Game data, he mentioned that there was aim sway increases, so your gun would not sway as much, it'd be more stable. On Sim, I could not find any pros in any of the listed stats. Nothing changed when I attached a heavy foregrip, hence the question marks. Now, on the other side, there are no cons to the heavy foregrip. It has no negatives, but I don't know why it's a thing because it doesn't really do anything in game from my understanding. So I said it was best for making the other options look better than they are, because when you have something that does nothing, something that does like very little, like the bipod, suddenly becomes a little bit more, inviting, if you will. So I think it's really weird here when we zoom out that we have several options on this list that are basically useless. Flashlight, bayonet, heavy foregrip, bipod, all of these I don't really think are that practical. Some of them are completely impractical. But then on the flip side, we do have some that are very, very strong. The pistol grip, skeletal underbarrel, compact, obviously Strife Angled, Carver, Handstop, all good options too. So it really just depends on what you're trying to get out of a weapon, how you want to build a weapon, whether it's for control, whether it's for speed. I don't think there's a true best underbarrel in any case. It's more weapon specific and player specific as to what you're going for with any specific loadout. But those are the detailed stats on every underbarrel that we've got in the game. I'm not gonna lie, I was very surprised that several of them are so stupid. But that is gonna wrap things up for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, let me know by dropping a like on it. It would be seriously appreciated. And if you are new to the channel, or if you have not already subscribed, every day I got you covered with all things going on in COD. So feel free to hit that sub button and turn on those post notifications. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I will catch you guys later. Peace out.